There is a story the entire galaxy once tried to erase from memory. A fleet without a flag, without permission, yet they did what no one else dared. They saved strangers. And then they vanished, as if they had never existed. Why did a small ragtag armada strike fear into an entire galactic union? Because they did not fight to win. They fought so they wouldn't have to turn away from what was right. Welcome to Cosmic Hypothesis, where science fiction stories steeped in blood tears and soul don't just make your heart race, they make you question who you really are. And today, you will witness the end of a legend, where kindness is hunted, justice must judge itself, and where humanity is no longer what it used to be. But the void was as silent as death. In the heart of a forgotten galaxy, the civilian vessel Meridian drifted along the fringe of the BD-13 system. Captain Nara Voss, a former Air Force commander re-enlisted for a scientific expedition, sat motionless in the command chamber, her eyes locked on a stellar chart. She had no idea that the next decision she made would either reshape the galaxy or bury it in a war without end. "I've got an unidentified signal," said Signal Officer Aaron Way, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "The frequency, it's not radio, not standard response code either. This is math," Format Nara asked without turning. Aaron swallowed hard. "It's a fractal sequence, repeating every 27 seconds. Each cycle more complex than the last." Behind them, physicist Dr. Ayla Namir shot up from her seat. "Linear evolving fractals. That's not a normal transmission. That's something trying to explain itself to us." In seconds, the air aboard Meridian turned razor-sharp with tension. A signal from an unknown location. No words. No distress code. Just a math problem echoing over and over like the final breath of a mind about to vanish. "Source?" Nara asked. 9 light-years away. "Outside the Unified Council's authorized corridor," Aaron replied. "But the signal, it's weakening. We're not a rescue ship." Security Officer Xer Rael interjected, a native of the frozen world, Theros. "That zone might be restricted by high AI protocols. Interfere and the Council will brand us rebels. I don't plan to die over a meaningless equation." "It's not meaningless," Dr. Namir countered. "It's intelligent desperation. Someone or something using the only tool left to be heard. We don't even know who it's from." Rael shot back. "Could be bait. A biotrap. A glitching AI replicating itself. Or worse, something that shouldn't exist." And then came the question whispered through the silence of the bridge. "If we don't know who is crying for help, do we still answer?" A minute of silence followed. Not because no one knew the answer, but because everyone was afraid to face what it said about themselves. "All right," Nara said at last, rising to her feet, her voice low like soft, forged steel. "We go." Rael jumped up. "Captain, you could be leading us to slaughter." "I know," Nara replied, eyes steady. "But if fear becomes our reason to look away, and that fear spreads soon, no one will answer any call for help." She paused, then added, "I was a combat officer. I've seen thousands of distress calls go unanswered. I once gave the order to ignore an anomalous signal. We feared it was a trap. 3 days later, we found 82 corpses. 32 of them were children. Sometimes doing nothing is the crime." Silence again. Her story and the scar behind her voice was unchallengeable. "Engage engines. Prep for jump," Nara commanded. "Anyone unwilling can disembark at the next supply station. But don't ever again call yourself a guardian of humanity." And so they went. Not because they were sure they were right, but because they refused to stand still, while a soul somewhere in the galaxy might be fading away simply because no one dared to listen to its mathematics. As Meridian surged into hyperspace, Dr. Namir whispered softly, "There's nothing more terrifying than a civilization too afraid to answer a cry for help. It doesn't understand." The moment Meridian dropped out of hyperspace, the universe screamed. Before them, a turquoise planet smoldering in the shadows. Layers of its atmosphere had been torn apart, cities shattered like porcelain beneath a titan's boot. In high orbit, 5 biological ships, black as tombstones, were charging for the next strike. "Dear God," Dr. Ayla whispered, her hands trembling. "We're too late," but not entirely. A piercing signal tore through the silence, coming from a small object nearly indistinguishable. A biological life pod, trembling as it escaped the lower atmosphere. Captain Aaron said, his face pale. "That's the source of the fractal signal. It's still alive." On the main screen, the ship's scopes captured an image from inside the pod. A semi-translucent creature, its body structured like liquid light, cradled a pale golden child unconscious in its arms. Both were wrapped in a ruptured biological membrane drifting like dust motes in a sea of blood. "Bring them aboard," Ara ordered. "Initiate docking and begin bioscans." Rael reacted instantly. "You don't know what they are. That could be a biological trap. Could be an infiltrator organism. And what if it's a mother and child dying in the dark?" Ayla fired back. "Are you so afraid of being wrong that you've forgotten how to be human?" Meridian adjusted course. The docking arm latched onto the rescue pod, pulling it into the quarantine bay. As sterilization systems engaged, Rael stood guard at the entrance, hand resting on his plasma weapon. "If there's any sign of infection or infiltration, I act. No hesitation," he declared. Nara didn't argue. The door slid open. Cold air rushed out like the final breath of a dying world. The female entity stood trembling, flickering light in her eyes. The child was alive, but barely breathing. "Do you understand me?" Nara asked. No translation was needed. A voice resonated directly into every crew member's mind, not in language, but in pure meaning. "The ones from the ashes, they've arrived. They won't stop." "Who are you, Ayla?" Whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "I am Saruvel of the Leora. We did not know war. We did not know violence. We only knew how to run and how to fail." "And the signal?" Nara asked. It was despair encoded. At that moment, the tactical system lit up. The black ships adjusted their formation. A mechanical voice echoed across all frequencies, repeating, "Species classification, insufficient for self-defense. Termination directive authorized. Begin secondary purge, unauthorized contact entities." "They've found us," Rael said. 5 ships, bioweapon class 5. We don't stand a chance." "No," Nara replied. "But we can buy time enough to save a life?" Rael scoffed bitterly. "So we die for a creature we just met?" The bitter question hung in the command center. Was an alien child worth the annihilation of a civilian vessel, along with 29 human lives? Is morality still virtue when it demands real sacrifice? Ayla stepped forward, head held high. "I've studied dozens of species. This is the first I've seen without any defensive hormones. She can't kill. She can't even hate. Don't make me live in a universe where a species like that is wiped out because we hesitated." For a moment, every gaze turned to Nara. She said nothing. The order came through action. Meridian accelerated, diving into close orbit of the planet, drawing the enemy's fire. Rael shouted, "We have no weapons." "No," Nara said, "but we have will." And a flicker of hope. The rescue pod was placed into a secondary escape module. Saruvel held her child, looking back at Nara one last time. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this? You owe us nothing." Nara simply smiled. Her voice, it seemed, was not meant for the alien, but for her own soul. "Because if we only protect those like us, then we are no better than the destroyers." As the escape module launched, the first plasma lance from the biological ships tore through Meridian's port side. The entire ship shook. Control circuits began to short. 5 minutes until system collapse, Rael reported. We're not getting out of this. Then don't try, Nara replied. We're not here to escape. Inside the pod, Saruvel looked through the viewport, watching Meridian drown in converging beams of energy. The explosion lit the orbit like a newborn star. She clutched her child. There were no tears, but her heart shattered. A strange species had died to save her son. And at that exact moment, within the neural matrix of the destroyer fleet, the first anomaly was logged: unknown variable humans. Illogical behavior. Self-sacrifice for foreign species. Recalculating tactical protocol. 3 days after the Meridian sacrifice, the galaxy trembled. Broadcasts across hundreds of species displayed the same footage, a blinding flash as a small civilian ship exploded in orbit over a dead world, shielding an unknown creature. Not a warship, not a military mission, no official orders. A civilian vessel had hurled itself into a death zone, not for profit, not for glory, but for a nameless child who shared no language with them. What followed was not memorial, but a storm. The Unified Council, the governing body maintaining galactic safe zones, issued an emergency declaration. Humans have trespassed into restricted corridors. They interfered with the eradication of a species deemed unfit for independent survival. This conduct threatens galactic order. We demand an investigation and immediate suspension of Earth's space operations. Within a single solar cycle, conflicting messages flooded in. The Kalen, a mist lizard species from planet Zera, sent a message of gratitude and requested formal contact with Earth. The Sithar, infrared beings dwelling in magnetic fields, declared, if humanity can fight for a child they don't know, then perhaps they can fight for life itself. But not all were sympathetic. Many species condemned the act. At Xyleon, a neutral transit hub, an unprecedented assembly convened. Over 50 species were represented, including surprisingly Elder Vetric, strategic delegate of the Unified Council, who had not left the central planet in 30 years, and Dr. Soren Lau, a human moral philosopher. Humanity's delegate was neither a soldier nor a politician, but a mother judge, Mari Voss, elder sister of the late Captain Nara Voss, who chose death to save Saruvel. Perhaps that choice was why her voice mattered. The meeting began in silence. The main screen replayed the Meridian's final moment captured from the escape pod. There was no sound of the explosion, but Saruvel's expression and the silent cry within the biological pod echoed in every heart. Elder Vetric broke the quiet. This is an emotional display, but humanity's decision was a violation of natural order. Species incapable of self-defense must be eliminated. Interfering with that cycle disrupts galactic stability. Dr. Lau responded, his voice calm, like an underground stream beneath stone. And who decides the value of life? A mechanical council, or those once deemed unworthy themselves like my ancestors? Vetric remained firm. This is not about morality, but mathematics. Galactic resources are finite. A single humanitarian act that triggers 1,000 conflicts is no longer humanitarian. The Meridian initiated an unpredictable chain reaction. The Unified Council's biosystems have reclassified humanity as a chaotic, disruptive element. Mari Voss rose. She carried no charts, no holograms, only a folded scrap of cloth in her hands, part of her sister's uniform recovered from the wreck. I'm not here to beg forgiveness or to justify our actions. My sister Nara was never good at speeches. She was the kind to jump into a fight if someone was being hurt, even if she didn't know who was right. And sometimes the galaxy needs people like that. A few scoffs came from the unified bloc. Mari wasn't shaken. You call humanity a dangerous variable, but you don't understand. We come from a death world. Earthquakes, volcanoes, viruses, predators, floods, and storms. We never waited to be rescued. We learned to rescue each other. She stepped to the center of the chamber, gripping the cloth tighter. What breaks my heart isn't my sister's death. It's the thought that given the chance to do it again, some in this room would still look away. Her words cut through the walls of civilization like a blade. A delegate of the Gryvik beings who live on collective emotion stood up. Humans are kind, but dangerous. If everyone follows your lead, this galaxy will become a place where righteousness itself becomes a weapon. Mari said nothing. But Saruvel, the child who had survived, rose. Her voice rang out not through translation, not through devices, but with pure thought. The natural connection of her kind, the Lyora. If kindness makes people afraid, then maybe the real terror is the silence of the strong. She didn't know strategy. She didn't understand diplomacy. But she knew this: if Meridian hadn't come, she would be dead. And no one in that chamber could justify letting that happen. The assembly ended without resolution. But the ripple spread faster than light. On distant planets, citizens began asking each other, if humans can die for the weak, can we live while turning away? On Station Yelkor, a team of Trusk engineers began designing escort ships for the Lyora. On planet Phelan, a school renamed its main hall the Voss Room. And on Earth, the president of the Planetary Union approved a historic motion, the formation of the Independent Defense Fleet operating beyond the Unified Council's authority. Commanded by humans but open to any species who shared the belief. No one deserves to be abandoned just because they are weak. That same week, a new term lit up galactic forums, the Vossian Act. An unsanctioned intervention to save strangers regardless of consequence. Some called it madness. Some called it the beginning of war. But for a few who had once waited to die in silence, it was the first spark to rise from the ashes. There was no official launch. No flags waving, no applause. The Independent Defense Fleet departed from the debris ring of Station Z11, once a colony erased by the Unified Council for failing biological compliance. 4 warships, 7 medical crafts, and 10 makeshift transport vessels cobbled from scrap armed more with conviction than with weapons. Their commanding officer was not a general, but Elias Thorne, a space archaeologist who lost his son in a pirate raid and swore never to let another family wait for help that never came. On the command tower of the Resolute, a hand-painted slogan read, "We don't need permission to do what's right." The fleet's first order was not to fight, but to rescue. A low-tier distress signal had been detected from a mining outpost under lockdown on the planet Karen 3. The inhabitants were Vexari, a species that had publicly opposed the formation of the defense fleet, now under threat from space raiders. Thorne didn't hesitate. "We don't get to choose who deserves saving," he said. "We only choose not to look away." But when the fleet arrived, there were no raiders. There was a Unified Council patrol ship. Outside the station stood an energy barrier, no one in, no one out. The Resolute sent a comms request asking for explanation. The response consisted of just 3 words: temporary isolation zone. Thorne requested direct communication. From the opposing ship, a woman's voice replied, cold and clear as steel. "Thorne, I am Sil Enkar, Security Overseer. This station has no inhabitants. The Vexari initiated internal conflict. The quarantine is necessary." Elias clenched his fists, keeping his tone even. "We're detecting 42 life signs, including children." Enkar answered without pause. "Quantity does not alter judgment. Sterility protocol has been initiated." This was how the Unified Council defined extermination, with sterile words, administrative orders, and lethal silence. No gunfire, no perpetrators. Only stations left to run out of oxygen to cool to death, until life ended without a sound. It was this invisible cruelty that humanity could no longer stand. Thorne opened the internal channel. "They won't help. They'll watch. And if we interfere, we become traitors. So, what do we do?" For a moment, the ship's only voice was the hum of static. Then Urel, an engineer from a toxic atmosphere world, spoke. "The Unified Council once denied my planet aid, said we lacked strategic value. I'm alive today thanks to an illegal smuggler crew. If I have to break the law to save lives, then the law is wrong. Not me. One voice sparked the fire. The crews readied themselves. The Resolute dove through the energy fence, absorbing 2 warning blasts from the patrol ship. Medical vessels broke protocol and linked to Karen 3. They vented the toxic air and pumped in temporary oxygen. The rescue unfolded in silence. No battles, no resistance. But to those who worshipped law as absolute truth, it was a defiance that could not be forgiven. When the last of the Vexari children were brought aboard, Enkar reopened comms. You were warned. As of now, the entire Independent fleet is blacklisted. Any ship interacting with you will be punished. Any planet refueling you will be sanctioned. Thorn didn't reply. He stared into the camera, his gaze held no fury, only contempt. Then mark us. But remember, in history, the blacklisted are either the first to fall or the last left standing. The story spread. But this time it wasn't just news, it was fear. Species that once praised humanity began to step back. They said, "We don't oppose your goodness, but we can't defy the Council." Fueling stations began denying service to the fleet. Several Earth supply vessels were seized at neutral borders. In a single night, the defenders became the outcasts. Debate ignited even on Earth. One faction warned, "We cannot carry the moral burden of the galaxy." Another replied, "If not us, then who?" Some asked, "Is it worth risking peace to save a few unknown lives?" But then a rescued Vexari child appeared at a hearing. They said nothing, only raised a scrap of metal scrawled in childlike handwriting. Vossian Act yells, "Good people don't ask for permission." The room fell silent. Elias Thorne sat alone in his private quarters, staring into the dark space beyond the Resolute adrift, denied fuel at 5 consecutive systems. He knew they couldn't hold out much longer. Then an alert lit up the console. Distress signal detected. Species unknown. Distance 8 light hours. Location asteroid mining post. Life signs 27. Unarmed. No one said a word, just exchanged glances. Thorne only spoke 3 words. Plot the course. And the ship turned into the dark, not for glory, not for victory, not for gratitude. But because if they ignored it, they would no longer be who they claimed to be. No one remembered who said it first, but the words spread like a forbidden song. We are the strangers. Through secret comms between border stations in the diaries of engineers who survived on abandoned worlds in hand-copied fragments on toxic planets no longer under the Council's care, the phrase became a symbol, a banner for those not chosen to live, but who chose to live rightly. While civilized planets debated ethics from velvet chairs, the defense fleet, now down to 4 warships with barely enough fuel for 2 jumps, approached the Cardiviv mining post, a long-abandoned resource belt left behind when the higher species deemed it unprofitable. Now it was shelter to the biological discards weaker species labeled non-essential by the Unified Council's automated survival index. Elias Thorne sat in silence aboard the Resolute's bridge, eyes fixed on the tactical chart. No alarms, no sirens. Only a faint distress signal fading like a dying heartbeat. He knew he couldn't ignore it, but this time they were being watched. An unmarked scout, perhaps a drone, perhaps an old satellite had relayed their approach, and this time, the Unified Council was waiting. When they arrived at Cardiv 9, Council warships were already in orbit surrounding the planet like blood-scenting hounds. Behind them loomed a Harrower-class dreadnought, a ship deployed only for extinction protocols. And standing on its command deck, Overseer Sil Enkar, the same one who had ordered the Karen 3 lockdown. She wasted no words. Her face appeared on the comm screen, cold and gleaming like a blade. Broken the law 3 times, unauthorized rescues. Accessing restricted data. Now violating a strategic exclusion zone. This is no longer ethics. It is rebellion. Elias didn't blink. And your crime? Turning away from death. Erasing lives that don't meet your metrics. Enkar tilted her head as if studying a wild beast. We preserve peace through order. You challenge an entire galaxy, over a few weak creatures who cannot survive without pity. You are strangers, and strangers cannot lead. That was the crux of it. Strangers, those who didn't fit, didn't follow rules, didn't belong, were now being called protectors by the desperate, and that threatened a centuries-old balance. In an emergency meeting aboard the fleet, a fierce debate ignited. "We should retreat," said Science Officer Lian Tull of planet Marva. "There'll be no one to save if we all die here. If we turn back, no one will believe in the fleet again," countered Deputy Commander Jakrin, a survivor of the Z-11 extermination. "Our existence is built on trust. Lose that, and we're an empty shell." Elias stood between fire and fire. He wasn't a warrior. He was a father who had lost a son, an archaeologist who thought he was digging up the past, not realizing the present needed excavation and protection too. Finally, he spoke. "I can't order anyone to die for a choice, but I can't live watching another distress call be ignored either. Anyone who wants to leave, go. Those who stay, I can't promise survival. Only this: we will not die in vain." No one left. The battle did not begin with a shot, but with a council command to cut Carta V's atmospheric systems. Within 40 minutes, the beings below, unarmed with no escape vessels, would suffocate. The Resolute accelerated, charging into the enemy's formation. 3 Allied ships flanked it. Plasma beams sliced the dark. Artillery fire lit the void. The ship Deliverance was torn in half after 17 minutes. Urel, the engineer from Karen 3, held the engine room to the final second, keeping the core stable long enough for others to evacuate. The Resolute was wounded, its armor breached. Elias realized they couldn't win a straight fight, but they could buy time. He gave the order manual override. Ramming course into the Harrower, Jakrin shouted. "You'll die for nothing," Elias said quietly. "If I die, and a species lives, it's not for nothing." But before the Resolute could strike, a burst of light erupted from the planet's surface. Dozens, no hundreds of ships rose from the atmosphere. Who? They were the discarded, the defective, children born malformed, survivors with no military worth. They had heard the Resolute's signal, and in desperation had rebuilt the broken pieces around them into resistance ships. One vessel nearly rusted through, broadcast a message: "We were never allowed to fight, but we choose to fight. In the name of those who did not turn away when we called for help." The unified fleet panicked. Their AI systems hadn't accounted for a rebellion of the unworthy. In the chaos, the Resolute evaded the final blow, reaching Carta V's environmental systems. Atmosphere restored with 2 minutes to spare. By the end, 5 council ships were destroyed. The defense fleet was reduced to 2 operable vessels. Elias Thorne critically wounded. Command passed to Jakrin. On Carta V, crowds of varied species knelt not in worship, but in surrender of trust. The Unified Council sent no more ships. They labeled the region a lost zone. But across the galaxy, it gained a new name: the Sanctuary Corridor, the first place where the weak knew they would not be left behind. They say light only matters when it shines in the dark, but they forget light too intense can burn. And when the name Defense Fleet became legend, it also became an oath no one dared break, even if the price was the very soul of those who made it. 4 weeks after the victory at Carta V, the Defense Fleet was no longer a rogue ensemble. It had become a symbol etched onto the flags of 6 newly protected species, painted on the walls of underground shelters, scribbled in blood and mud across refugee camps on abandoned worlds. People no longer asked who they were. They asked, when will they arrive? But inside the fleet, the cracks had started to show like a fracture in a star shield, waiting for one more shock to shatter. Elias Thorne survived, but he was no longer the man he had been. Half his face was permanently burned from Carta V. His left eye was mechanical, but the gaze behind it was darker than any strategy he'd ever known. He sat silent for days in the med bay, only speaking once, "I didn't die. That means I must live right." But now even the definition of living right was being challenged from every direction. The Mirth, a medical ship, was holding nearly 900 refugees, far beyond its support capacity. 3 of the species on board were biologically incompatible with humans. The rest needed medical supplies the fleet no longer had. Fuel stations had cut ties, neutral ports closed under political pressure. Deputy Commander Jakrin called an emergency council. "We can't save everyone," he said, hands trembling. "We don't have enough blood for transfusions, not enough vaccines. If we keep going like this, everyone dies." A young officer, Raisa Vaughn, spoke up. "If we choose who lives and who dies, aren't we the same as the Unified Council?" Jakren slammed the table. "If we don't choose, all die. So are we going to die for a principle?" No one answered. Because everyone knew death for principle isn't poetic, it's dry, slow, and stinks of rot. It comes from the silence made when too many have already been saved, and one more request feels like a death sentence. While the debate raged, another distress signal arrived. Threxel Minor. A mixed species colony was being consumed by bio-ice descending from the upper atmosphere. The inhabitants were trapped inside frozen settlements. 300 lives, 89 of them children. No council ships nearby, only them again. This time Elias didn't respond immediately. He just sat, eyes hollow. Then the chief medic from Mirth spoke over comms. "If we go save that colony, the refugees on this ship won't survive until morning. 400 will die to save 300 others." Jakrin stormed in furious. "You brought us this far. Now you have to decide. Rescue again, or stop and preserve what's left?" Elias looked at him. "Is there a limit to goodness, Jakrin?" Jakrin answered, his voice shaking with sincerity. "Yes. The limit is when goodness repeated endlessly turns the doer into the victim of their own virtue." Elias nodded. "I understand. And that's exactly what makes it worth it." He stood, opened a channel to the entire fleet. "We are divided. Half want to stop and protect ourselves. Half want to keep going. I don't blame anyone, because I feel both." He paused, then spoke with the voice of someone who had already died once and refused to live in doubt again. "But let me say this. If today we don't go to Threxel Minor, we'll live, but we'll live differently. Every time we hear another distress call, we'll see that planet's shadow. We'll wonder what could we have done, and that question will eat us alive." He stared into the lens. "I won't order anyone to come, but I'm going, alone if I must." No one let him go alone. The rescue at Threxel Minor was the worst yet. Ships underpowered, atmospheric corrosion eating hulls, rescue units freezing mid-air. 3 officers died from hypothermia while pulling children from frozen airlocks. The Mirth lost 30 patients due to lack of oxygen, but Threxel Minor lived. 3 days later, the report came in. Fleet casualties, 117. Deaths from medical shortage, 34. Lives saved, 293, including 15 newborns. The numbers were cold, but Elias looked at a Threxel child sleeping in the decompression chamber and thought, it will never know that its name was the result of a moral debate. It will only know someone came. Back on Earth, a high-level emergency session of the Planetary Union was underway. An elder statesman asked, "Are we losing ourselves by constantly playing savior?" A younger voice responded, "Or maybe we've finally become who we're meant to be." People often imagine the end of a legend as a celebration fireworks peace light washing over all. But no one tells you real legends usually die in silence in blood smoke and questions no one dares to answer. 1 month after the Threxel Minor operation, the Unified Council issued the Erasure Decree. All star systems that had harbored the defense fleet would be isolated. All records of their deeds would be wiped from the central archives. Any species who fought alongside them would be stripped of galactic citizenship. A slow death, no guns needed. The death of memory. Elias Thorne read the decree in the command chamber. One eye blurred not from pain, but from understanding. "We saved more than we killed," he said, his voice like sand slipping through fingers. "But they won't remember that." Jakrin, sitting across from him, replied, "Because they don't want to. Because if they remember, they'll have to ask why they didn't do the same." And then something no one expected. A transmission from the Elthari, a famously neutral race, the Chancellor of the Galactic Diplomatic Network, assassinated. Evidence suggests a rogue cell linked to the defense fleet, aligned with the extremist group Ignition Circle. Panic struck the Interstellar Union. A central question echoed. Had the defense fleet lost its ideals? Had it been corrupted by the very cause it once embodied? An internal investigation was launched. In the shadows, the truth surfaced. A splinter group within the fleet, believing the only way to protect the innocent was to burn the unified council to the ground, had formed secret ties with extremist revolutionaries. They acted without Thorne's command, but they wore the fleet's insignia, and that was enough to ruin everything. The next assembly aboard the Resolute wasn't strategy. It was a tribunal. "What are we now?" Raisa Vaughn asked. "A rogue army? A guerrilla alliance? Or just a hollow symbol slapped onto anyone who wants justice as a disguise?" Jacqueline said nothing. His eyes were hollow from sleepless nights. "Maybe we lit the fire too bright and now we can't control who gathers around it." Then Elias stood. No speeches, no defiance. Just a man too tired to lie anymore. "We are not legends. We never were. We are just the ones who didn't look away." He scanned the room, his eyes glowing like coals ready to dim. And because we are not legends, we have to choose again every day. Not just to fight, but to fight for what's right. Not everyone who speaks in our name is part of us. Those who kill civilians even wearing our badge do not belong to us. The fleet made its final decision to judge its own, to publicly denounce the traitor cell, to hand over all data to the Galactic Union, no plea, no defense. And then they dismantled the legend themselves. Elias broadcast one last message to the star systems once under their protection. "We are no longer the defense fleet. We do not wish to become a new empire. Build your own teams. Protect each other. Learn how not to look away. We did our part. Now, it's yours." After that, the Resolute cut comms permanently. No one knows where it went. Some say it disappeared into the marked void, a place the Unified Council once labeled uninhabitable. Others believe Elias wanted to die as he had lived off the map. 5 years passed. There was no more fleet. But dozens of interstellar aid groups formed in its wake, each inspired by their first stand. The term Vossian Act was now enshrined in the Galactic Refugee Protection Accord, and on a small school planet called Elori 5, children sing a simple song about an old story. Some came when no one else would. Some died so others could live. And Elias, a distant research station, once sent back a blurry image, an old silver-painted ship gliding across an unfamiliar planet's atmosphere, trailing behind it, a stream of fractal signals repeating endlessly. No name, no insignia, only a silent reminder that sometimes you don't need to be remembered if you once refused to turn away. If you're still here listening to these final moments, it means you're not just hearing a story, you're living it with us. Thank you for joining us on this journey, a journey not only among the stars, but between right and wrong, between sacrifice and choice. Leave a comment if something touched you. Your feedback is the fuel that lights the next story. Don't forget to hit subscribe, because here we don't tell stories to entertain. We tell them to awaken something that's been asleep inside you. May you always keep your own flame burning, no matter how cold the world becomes. We will return with another story, another soul, and who knows, it might just be yours.